rock right along to Ali Whitelock. Um, Ali Whitelock, let me tell you a little bit about her, is a Scottish poet and writer now living on the south coast of Sydney with her French chain-smoking husband, which makes me worry for him, Ali. I hope he's not, smoking too much. She's published 3 poetry collections. Check out these titles: The Lactic Acid in the Calves of Your Despair, long listed for the ALS Gold Medal in 2021, and My Heart Crumples Like a Coke Can. Her 3rd collection, most recently, A Brief Letter to the Sea About a Couple of Things, was released in May 2023 by Wakefield Press. Her memoir, Poking Seaweed with a Stick and Running Away from the Smell, was published to critical acclaim, both here in Australia and in the UK. She spends her time writing and staring out the window. And as some of us at Liquid Amber will remember, Ali was the one who did such a wonderful launch of our last year's anthology, The Poetry of an Encounter. I think we're still talking about that. So welcome, Ali. Fantastic to hear from you tonight as our poet in the spotlight.
Thank you so much. I can't believe it's been a year since the launch of the last anthology. Wow. Thank you for having me. This has been such a glorious night of poetry. It's just been absolutely joyous to sit here and absorb everyone's words. But tonight I wanted to start with a quote by Arthur Miller. Arthur says, "The best work that anybody ever writes is the work that is on the verge of embarrassing him always." And this quote speaks to me so acutely. Somehow I have always felt compelled to reveal my most personal and potentially embarrassing thoughts and details of my life on the page. This need to always be writing my truth has become even more pressing in these so-called days of post-truth. And lately, the only places that I feel I can reliably find truth is in poetry, but also in comedy. And recently, I heard Billy Connolly say, these days, the only people that we can trust to tell us the truth are the comedians and the poets. And I think Billy is right on the money there with that quote. In addition to truth, my writing will often involve risk of some kind. It will somehow involve me flirting with things best left unsaid. And it will always involve me saying to myself, go on, write it, I dare you. And so with that in mind, I'm going to read you this poem from my new collection, A Brief Letter to the Sea About a Couple of Things. This poem is in 3 parts. Part 1. I leaned my head against yours, as though my forehead were a mouth I could share secrets through. I was never a good person, though somehow I am surrounded by angels. As children, we weren't twins, but we dressed almost the same in clothes Mum made for us from remnants of bewildered reds, injured blues, disquieting yellows. Too often there was enough fabric for matching headscarves. With our monobrows in our grey Scottish swing parks, we were the Frida Kahlos of our time. When I no longer knew what to do with it, I breathed my secret into your forehead, then careened through the fog of the swing park, pulled on a punctured life jacket with a red light and whistle for not attracting attention in the shadow of a maroon shopping trolley. I tore the wings off butterflies, drowned bees in a jar. Part 2. In the days before anti-caking agents, my grandmother kept the salt cellar on the hearth, her Bellini ingredients behind the fluted glass doors of the kitchen cabinet. 2 ceramic swans swam lazily across her sideboard, their hollow backs transporting house keys, fishermen's friends, silver shillings down the river to nowhere. The last time I saw him was in my dreams. wrapped in curtains that didn't quite reach the floor, then shuffling towards a roaring log fire. I watch on, hoping he'll trip and be engulfed in flames. Instead, he pirouettes from the curtains, turns to face me, his pink fingers fat like pork sausages spread terrifyingly across the mantelpiece. I wake from the dream thinking of bees. Part 3. The landlady at the Blackpool boarding house shows us to our accommodation. The 5 of us sleep in the same room in the absence of a telly. My father, itching for a drink and not knowing what to do in a room full of his own children, makes sad shadow puppets on the wall. A one-eared dog, a not praying, drowning mantis, a peace dove having a heart attack mid-air. The next morning after breakfast, we stroll along the seafront, filling our lungs with the good sea air we're instructed to inhale deeply. We pause by the amusement arcade with its shop selling lackluster starfish, brightly embarrassed crabs, fragile seahorses that once danced to the music of the sea. A solitary shaved coconut, transformed into a tiny handbag, hangs from a hook in the corner. Yellow Rapunzel braids dangle off each side, its womb-like interior lined with warm velvet, a place to whisper my secrets, to bury the bees I've yet to drown. Thank you so very much. Rose had asked me also just to talk about some poets or other books that I'm reading at the moment. And one thing that I am reading at the moment is very front of mind because this anthology was just published. And it's an anthology called Unbridled. And it is an absolutely breathtaking collection of women's voices. The collection is edited by the brilliant poet, Scottish poet Maggie Gibson, who was recently voted in the top 3 best poets in Scotland by readers of the Scotsman newspaper, which is quite an accolade. So I wanted to read a poem from that anthology. This is a poem by a poet called Sharon Frame, and the poem is called The Table. A woman full of the contentment of living comes home and puts her phone on the table, lights her favourite candle and puts it down there. She puts the tea and the chocolate on the table. She puts the grey, overcast sky and spattering rain on the table. The steamy, damp bus with the broken bits of chatter she puts on the table too. Next to them, she puts the cheerful, jangling sounds of the coins in the till and the thank you from the woman at the shop. She carefully placed her Roisin, snuggling and sleepy, on the table. Beside her on the table, she placed the memory of her girls, excited and sparkly eyed, watching Goosebumps on Sunday afternoon. Her hopes and fears for her future she laid down on the table. The people she loved were placed on the table, and a few she despised were put there too. Her longing to be more was placed on the table alongside the certainty she was going in the right direction. The table was large and strong for an IKEA coffee table, and it stood solid under the weight she piled upon it. She smiled to herself, thanked it, and not for the first time considered it £35 well spent. Thank you. The other collection that I'm absolutely immersed in at the moment is a collection called Where We Are. And it's by Alison Flett. Alison was a Scottish born poet and based in Adelaide. And for those of you who may not be aware, Alison died on the 29th of July this year. a devastating loss to the world and to the world of poetry. I can't stop crying about it. And I offer my condolences to Alison's family and anyone who loved her. The thing about Alison's collection is that it pulses with this ache for all that she left behind in Scotland. And her poems spoke to me so very directly to that. They just spoke to the same ache in me. But before we even get to the poems, from the first line of her preface, I was already howling. Every poem unravelled me. I devoured the collection like my heart was starving, and each poem somehow put my desperately aching heart back together again. So I'm just going to read one stanza from one of Al's poems. It's from the poem called Connections. Let's see if I can get through it. The grasshopper in the bathroom. I trod on it in socks, not smushing it, but breaking off a leg and not noticing until I sat on the milky bath edge in half light and a small movement came to me. I peered closer. What is that? And saw the wee thing crawling around its broken leg, nudging it with its head as if trying to coax it into life, circling and circling, touching it. I felt what I thought must be its confusion and grief, and my throat was thick with what I'd done, its poor big eyes. I didn't know how to make amends. So I will leave it there. I'd like to read more of Al's work, but I'm not going to be able to do it without crying anymore. So thank you so much for listening to me and for the invitation, Rose.
Thank you so much, Ali. That was absolutely wonderful. And I think as Roxanne's popped in the chat, thank you for sharing, such sort of closely felt, emotions and experiences. And I think, yes, we all noted, the tragedy of Alison's premature passing. But yes, as a Scottish poet in particular, too, I guess you guys are singing a similar song. So thank you so much for sharing her work, and of course for sharing your work. The Poet in the Spotlight concept, I guess, is a bit of a chance to hear a little more from some. Oops, press the mute. A little more from someone, and just a little bit more of their context and background to help us all know you and to think about poetry. So thanks, Ali.
Thank you.